Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Irvine, California at the Saleen Corporate Headquarters. This is where they make the fantastic Saleen Mustangs. You're going to get a chance to meet Steve Saleen in just a moment and see some great Saleen cars. I love these cars. I actually own one of them and I'm very happy about that. Unfortunately, it's not this one, but you're going to learn more about this particular car and a lot more of the Saleen Mustangs. So do what I tell you to do every week. Just kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Steve Saleen, thank you very much for being gracious enough to let us in your facility here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm glad you finally found time to come and visit us.
Yeah, we've tried before, and I have good news. I own number 705 of the 1988 run. The car is doing well. It looks great. It gets driven almost every day, and I really enjoy owning it.
Actually, that's great. That's really great.
Yeah, Steve expressed earlier off camera that he every night he loses a little sleep wondering whatever happened to number 705 from 1988.
Yeah, that was, now I know.
Now you know.
Now I know.
Yes. How did this all come about?
You mean Saleen the company?
The Saleen the company.
Initially, I was in professional racing, and I was with driving professionally for Pontiac Motor Company, and they were trying to do special edition vehicles, Pontiac Trans Am specifically. And at the same time, we won the championship in the early 80s, 82. Ford had just come back into racing, and I got to know the guys at Ford, and I said, you ought to consider doing special edition vehicles. And one thing led to another, and decided that we would start my own company, and literally did that, and decided that the Mustang was probably the better vehicle for what we were going to do, and debuted our first car in 1984, and haven't looked back since. So
and I understand your very first customer was your sister, is that correct?
Well, I had to talk her into buying a new Mustang to begin with, and then loaning it to me, and then she got it back a couple years later. So
well broken in.
Yeah, well broken in, but a very valuable car.
That was 1984, right?
Yeah, the end of the end of 83 and the beginning of calendar year 1984.
So where is number one at?
Well, it subsequently was sold to a car collector in Indiana. He actually has the first 3 cars we've ever built, Stu Akers, and they're in his collection in Indiana.
So your racing history, this was one of the early cars that you were driving, correct?
Yes, actually you're looking at the car that helped us win our first championship, which was in 1987. And the significance of this has more significance today because it was when, in understanding in our particular racing, we kind of was very similar in taking basically production-based vehicles, in our case a Mustang, and racing it in SCCA competition, and similar to what the Trans Am series was back in the late 60s, early 70s. And to kind of duplicate that, I had asked during that year both Parnelli Jones and George Fulmer to come and drive on one of our teammates in one of the 3 cars that we were racing. And this is the particular car that they drove at Sebring, Florida, the night that we actually won our first championship in 1987.
Very special night.
Yeah.
Well, Parnelli Jones right here, and Parnelli Jones right here, big time.
Yeah.
So tell us about this one.
Well, this is the original Trans Am car that this was, I know I'll come back and say this is dating myself a little bit in 1987. However, I was old enough to drive, but just barely, when I actually watched Parnelli win the championship in this car.
This very car.
Yeah, at Riverside. I was in turn 6 at that. It was the Mission Bell 250 race, and so today we have it here as part of our promotional tour that we're currently doing with Parnelli on the Parnelli Jones special edition that we're doing as a Saleen Mustang. And what we've done is we've done a complete replica, as close as we can in today's, of the Trans Am championship winning car that he ran with the Boss 302 back in 1970.
Well, there are a lot of Parnelli Jones new Saleens being manufactured around the corner. Can we take a look at some of those?
Yeah, why don't we walk on over and I'll show you the line of our production.
Okay, so the process is you place an order with Ford for what is the process? How's it start?
Well, actually, it's over the years I've kind of done it every which way. We've had special built Mustangs, our specs built. I've taken completely built Mustangs and all of that. Currently, what we're doing is we basically have a very specific build of a Mustang GT that Ford produces out of the Flat Rock plant, and then that's shipped directly to our facilities here. And then we'll take the car in and completely strip it apart. And all the parts that come off of it, we found over the years, we have a distribution through auto dismantlers, wholesalers, and even through our retail store for what we call the takeoff parts. And it's a pretty good buy too, I would say, is that when we say takeoff, they've actually had, and I actually figured it out one day, it actually has about 500 feet. It's actually the actual mileage that is on that set of brand new tires and wheels, whatever it is that we take off. But we'll strip the car virtually completely down. And what we're watching here is really a stripping down of the car, from the exterior body panels, complete drivetrain, engine, rear end, everything, you name it. It gets down into what you would call a stripped situation. And then from that point in time, we'll start through the vehicle build-up process. And everything we've done on the car, as you'll see, is very unique to Saleen. We take pride in the fact that we have designed it, engineered it, we're either manufacturing, tooling it, or having it manufactured to our spec. In the case for the Parnelli-Jones edition, it's, we'll keep, at the end of the day, we'll keep the front fenders and the roof, the doors, and the quarter panels will all stay intact. The headlights stay intact and taillights stay intact, and that's pretty much it. Everything else has been stripped, removed, changed, and all of that through its metamorphosis.
So we have the car, it's been dismantled to the basics, now what?
Well, we took the engine out of one, and on the other lift we put the engine back in. And then it'll be then put into this section here where we'll start doing the refinement to it. You can see that the engine has been installed, and that's been built up out of our engine shop. This is a legitimate 302 cubic inch motor. So another thing about Saleen is we tend not to do things on a cosmetic only basis. So typically it's on there for a reason. So so we've had the engine installed. You can see though the interior has been pretty well stripped down, as well as the trunk. It doesn't have any of the suspension on it yet. We did put the back wheels and tires again on the efficiency of the build sequence that we actually go through here. And we're now prepping for the lines for the radiator and those type of applications at this point.
So your 302s, who makes those engines, or you're having the blocks made up and you're building the 302s?
We're building the engines completely 100% here,
100%
out of our engine facility, in-house. So we're using the standard block, but we have different crank rods, pistons, heads, valves, camshafts, springs. The FIAD, the front engine accessory drive, is different, as you can see by the different pulleys on that. All of that has been changed, and that's how we're able to get 400 horsepower and 390 foot-pounds of torque in a very drivable package, as what you've experienced earlier today. And then we go through and we do all the calibrations. We don't use chips. We take the actual ECU unit, recalibrate it the way it was meant to, so that when you turn on the air conditioning and you're in Florida, the engine will calibrate correctly, so you'll still maintain maximum horsepower, maximum drivability.
So here we are looking at some suspension here. What's going on?
Yeah, in this station, as you can see, is that the suspension then goes through its metamorphosis, and we change it dramatically. This is not a minor change. Obviously, it's the springs and our own racecraft shock absorbers and struts. But all the bushings, as you can see, have been changed, as well as the sway bar. And what's particularly of interest here is on the Parnelli-Jones, as you can see, is that we've adapted our own version, if you will, of the Watts link. We actually call it a Saleen link. And this has actually transformed the whole chemistry of the Mustang. And where we came up with the idea, again, to be kind of true to the heritage of the car, is that back in the mid to late 60s and early 70s, in production car, you had two schools of thought in superior car handling, especially as it played on road courses. And that is that a number of the manufacturers were putting panhard rods on the car, or they were putting a Watts type of linkage on it. And the Trans Am cars, the Boss 302 that Parnelli and George Fomo ran, actually had a Watts link. That's a little harder to adjust, but the benefits, I think, are much better. And what we did to be true to the heritage of the car was to go ahead and re-engineer that in today's production. And what you can see is basically is what I call the Z, where it fastens to the body, it comes across and pivots through a different housing that we've cast here at Saleen, and then on over here to the other side of the body. And what this does, it helps keep the body in check all the time for better cornering, but it also, in the way that it works, is that when the car goes under compression on the suspension, you end up with keeping the contact patch of the car in better contact with the road, which ultimately means you get better traction. And better traction means typically you handle better or you can go faster. Right. And in our adaptation here, this has come out to be unbelievably a significant improvement on the whole car. And one of the things that you might have experienced in driving is, even though it's in the rear of the car, is how easy in the point in when you turn the car on how it actually points to the apex or where you're trying to go, and the transient response from left to right was a lot more easier to do in the car that you drove today. Most of that comes from the benefit of what we actually do on the rear of the car.
What happens here?
Well, the next step here is we pretty much have put in the drivetrain. It has the engine, transmission, drive shaft differential. As we saw from the last station, we also had the entire suspension. This now has all wheels and tires on it. It has our own special replica Mini Light style inspired from the race car that we've designed to work in harmony with the suspension on this. So now what will happen here is the aerodynamic and the body fascias will get done. And what you can see behind me is that we have the rear fascias over there and we have the front fascias here, the hood application, the rear wing, trunk, all of the body pieces that will have been painted in the paint shop will have already been made with all the attachments up here, so we can just literally bolt it on.
We have the bumpers back on, we have the front end and the fascia and all that back on. Now what's happening?
Well, you can see that basically the car's getting pretty complete except for the hood, and we haven't applied the interior, but you can see that the front fascia on it, we even have replicated, if you will. Back then chrome was used a lot more, and we actually have a nice chrome accent piece on the front and the rear, which gives it that little bit of extra touch that you would, as a proud owner, like to see on your vehicle.
The interiors on Saleens have always been unique. What are we looking at here?
Well, here is really the final station, and this is where we've put in the special interior. It actually has unique seating. It has different side bolsters for, again, more performance-oriented driving. And then we've matched it, as you can see. We've taken high quality leather here. I actually always love the smell of a new car, but we've now matched it with the orange into the exterior of it to really make it an official, if you will, Parnelli Jones edition vehicle. And the thing we tried to pick up is that the styling with the stitching is very reminiscent, though, of the late 60s, early 70s too, in a modern way. So we've matched the front seats and the back seats. We now have a very unique dash. We put the twin gauge pod on it again for the racing style touch. It has the Saleen racing foot pedals in it for better grip. Has a special Parnelli Jones short throw shift mechanism with the special shift knob. And then probably the crowning piece on it that's important is that you see each and every center panel there is signed by both Parnelli Jones and myself to give it that authenticity. And he and I have signed literally every one that we're doing.
You mentioned the styling cues from that era.
Yes.
Also your blinds here back on the
Yeah,
back window.
as we look on here, one of the other things that give it the authenticity is that we actually have recreated the sports slats. And the sports slats are, again, you've seen them on a lot of different cars over the years. Here, though, these are not borrowed from Ideno. We had to create the own design, our own molds, and our own tools to actually duplicate it, to replicate it, so that proportionally it was correct and is integrated into it. And it actually is pretty cool driving around town, I have to say. It keeps the car very cool. You can see out of the rear
that's what I noticed.
in a very excellent way. And it gives the car a very unique type of contemporary yet retro styling.
So the Parnelli Jones model, this is the completed. This one is just about ready to go out the door?
Yeah, this one here, the next station here, and it'll be the final one. It'll go through what we call the House of Lights, where it'll go through a final detail inspection, and then it'll be given, hopefully, the okay to ship, and then it'll go to your nearest Saleen dealer near you.
There's something about shaker hoods that are so cool, so hot roddy.
It's, again, I think a kind of a iconic look, especially of the muscle cars of the 60s, was having actually a shaker hood. And of course, from our standpoint, we couldn't just put on a cosmetic piece, so we went ahead and we designed our own shaker hood, very styled, very similar to what the Boss 302 Mustang had. However, this is a functional shaker hood, complete in today's environment, with all the other requirements from emission to the way that the air box has to function, into the mass airflow sensors and all of those requirements today. So we went through a lot of engineering to make this so you actually have a Rammler effect in a very functional hood in today's market.
And this is specific just to the Parnelli Jones. Your other model of Saleens don't offer this.
Yeah, we again have applied it here on this, again, because it is so much a part of the retro feel. From an air efficiency, you tend to want to have smoother hoods in the days to really go fast. So to be true to the car, we felt that the shaker hood was appropriate.
The cool factor
And
is mighty
plus,
high
it
here.
looks cool. And I will say, driving the car, it is really pretty
Looking
cool.
down on that,
and when you actually rev the motor at a stoplight, it's always fun to see it tilt a little bit.
Well, if I treat my wife really well and I save all my pennies, I can afford one of these. But things are going to have to improve markedly before we get one of the S7s. Can we take a look at that?
Yeah, we'll go to that next. And there we set out to build the world's fastest production car, bar none, and we've achieved that.
Your S7 model resulted in the automotive community being dumbstruck with the beauty of it, the power of it, the performance of it. How did that happen?
In the 90s, I toyed with a little bit of doing our own car, and I think, again, as a kid, or if you're in the cars, and at an early age, you always dream about, well, what would be the ultimate car? It would be always to build your own sports car. And of course, it can't be any sports car. It has to be a mid-engine car and the fastest in the world. And as things kind of lined up for me as early 2000s, we were able to kind of put all that together. And in doing that, we then came apart and said, we'll do the S7. And the S7, we didn't want to do just any car. We wanted to do a car that would be the fastest in the world. To do that, we started with a clean sheet of paper. And what you see here, it basically is our own design. This is a American-made chromoly tubing with a honeycomb reinforcing to get a very light chassis, a very strong chassis. And that in today's technology, we even incorporated what you see here as a crash box. This actually can be run into a wall. We designed it to, in case the driver had a problem at the end of the, let's say, the Mulsanne Straight at the end of Le Mans, and had to go into the wall, we wanted him to survive. But also it works very well in a normal situation when we had to actually crash test the cars, to the way that this actually absorbs the energy in that impact. But what you see here is the beginnings of an S7. It's all fabricated here on our premises out of our fab shop. And then we lay in aluminum honeycomb to give it that extra strength.
What's going on here?
Well, this is basically the next in sequence. We don't do a lot of these cars, only about 2 a month. So it is not quite the production sequence that we've seen, in our other vehicles. But nevertheless, it is a production sequence where we'll take the raw chassis and start. In here, basically, you're looking at all the innards. And I will tell you, there are miles and miles of wiring in today's modern car, whether it's a supercar or a normal passenger car. And you basically see all of the wirings, the connection. The air conditioning has been put in here, as well as the heater core. You're looking at all of the suspension pieces now have been applied. Again, all of these are fabricated out of our shop here at a very high-end level. The uprights go through a 17-hour machining process to do each and every one. And everything but really the engine now has been applied on this car.
Mm-hmm. And there appears to be something missing, as in the body panels.
Yeah, the way, again, this car is constructed and was designed is that the chassis and a lot of that can go on first, and then the center section and then the body panels then get bolted on and sandwiched together to give a very strong aerodynamic sound vehicle.
Mm-hmm. What is the next step after this?
After here, we will look at the engine installation.
All right. The car is advanced from what we just looked at, and we have a great big motor sitting back here.
Yeah, the motor has been dynoed. A lot of the parts have been run in that we pre-test, and it has the center section. The body, a lot of the body has been fitted at this point in time, and we'll take then this, and this is a Saleen motor. I will emphasize that it's our own block, our own heads. We start with raw casting of heads, put them in a CNC, and again, 17 hours later, they come out as a complete set of port and polish heads. We're fabricating our own long intake runners, and this then will be taken and inserted in mid-engine into the car, bolted together, and then taken out on test drives to make sure that all the systems are operating properly.
Mm-hmm. So the engine ends up in the midsection there. Yep. The rest of the body is put on, the fine-tuning is done, and then that's the end product?
Yeah, it gets mated with our own transmission as our own bell housing. The transmission is made by a company in Texas for us, and the rest of the suspension gets bolted on, and it really sandwiches together and gives it an exceptionally strong chassis in the way that you can see how the tubes are being duplicated in the way that they get sandwiched together.
Any of our viewers that have an extra, $500,000, $550,000 can go home with one of these?
Yeah, unfortunately it's probably closer to 600 today.
600?
But it is, again, we always consider that a very good value, because this certainly will be faster than, let's say, the new Bugatti Veyron, which is twice the price. So if you want it, you can own 2 of these for the price of 1 and have a lot of fun with it.
We started with the framework, we worked our way up to suspension and other parts, then we got a motor in it, then we got some body panels on it. This is the end product.
Yes, and here you have a complete Saleen S7, and it's the world's fastest production car, and it has a very good racing pedigree as well.
And what is that?
Well, the car has arguably has been the most successful supercar ever made in that respect, because the car has either been the fastest race lap, set on a pole, or won the race at every major racetrack in the world with no exception. And it has more wins than any other supercar ever made. And all of these are by privateer teams, not even a factory team running it. It has the record in the pole position at Le Mans. It's won Sebring, it's won at Daytona, on and on and on. So the car, we are very proud of that fact. From a racing standpoint, the heritage of this car is really, there is no equal.
It's absolute perfection for the history, the racing history. And then I understand there's someone that people think of as absolute perfection, and this car is owned by that person.
Well, that's true. It was the star in the movie Bruce Almighty, and for those that don't remember the premise of it, Jim Carrey, basically it was a comedy, and he traded places with God, and he had the almighty powers, and he drove a beat-up Nissan, as I recall in the movie, and as soon as he realized that he had almighty powers, he changed that into an S7, and then he drove the S7 as God's car. And so we typically affectionately refer to it as the S7 as God's car. In fact, so much that we actually have a little saying around here that the Pope may drive a Ferrari, but God drives an S7. So we have a little fun with our Ferrari friends.
And God has a little magic when God wants to get into this car. I understand it's quite easy.
You know, that's true. And in fact, if we stand back a little bit, as if you would expect it as God's car, is that we can demonstrate that it actually has the doors open as wings, so it should fly.
From magic spiritual powers there. Well, you have shown us some spiritual powers here with your history of the whole from 1984 to today. I am a car guy my entire life, and I want to pass on a little piece of advice to you here, Steve. I think you should stick with it. I think this whole Saleen thing is going to work out for you.
Well, and I appreciate it, and it's been an interesting journey, and we certainly thanks for sharing the afternoon with you.
Okay, thanks for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show, and thank you for watching this week. And if you enjoyed this show, tune in again next time. See you then. Bye-bye.